Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Playbook. This is episode number 71. This week's guest is Debbie Brunner. Debbie, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Joe.
Excellent. Well, it's great to see you. So why don't you kind of start off? We usually like to start these podcasts off by, getting to know our guests a little bit. And first question we like to ask is, what made you decide to become a realtor?
Well, I initially moved to Florida to go to law school, and life changes, and that didn't work. And somebody met me in a bar, literally, and said, have you ever thought about a career in real estate? He was a broker. And I had, actually. And he said, great, I'll pay for you to go to school. And that's how it started.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So kind of coming down here, go to law school, and then, grab a couple drinks at a bar. And the next thing you know, here you are.
Here I am.
So when you, I guess coming down, obviously thinking about law school, going to law, what were you doing prior to real estate?
I have a degree in social work.
Okay.
But originally going to college, I wanted to go to law school. And back in the day, my guidance counselor said, are you sure you don't want to be a teacher or a nurse? It was of the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it just happened that way, and ended up getting a degree in social work and worked at the children's home with emotionally disturbed children for several years.
Oh, wow.
And I was making about $6,500 a year. And I thought, there's got to be a better way to make money.
Yeah, I'd say
and so it just evolved. And that person, it was a timing issue, literally. And my first commission was $6,000.
Yeah, so almost as what you're making in a
Right.
year.
Yeah, so this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Made your decision, get you that confidence
absolutely.
rather quickly.
Yes, it did.
So one thing, this is twofold. One is, we like to find out some of the things, especially with higher producers, agents who achieve a higher level of success, what some of the skills that they brought from their previous endeavors over. So, and then I also want to talk about kind of how that translated, because now you're doing more, real estate coaching. You're still in production, but still coaching with the agents. And I know you kind of mentioned a teacher as a recommendation, and see if that kind of influenced any way. But let's start with like what you learned at, doing that for a year, working with the kids. What are some of the things, attributes, or skills you kind of picked up that helped you, transition over to real estate and to get in production quicker than most agents would?
I was always in front of people. In college, I gave tours of the campus. And so I loved it. I mean, I was opening doors. I was showing buildings. I was explaining things. And I was really talking to people and trying to convince them, you should come to school here. And I did a lot of hospitality work front of the, the store. So bartending, waitressing, hostessing. So it was natural for me to guide people. And so it was an easy transition.
Yeah, and we found a lot of that too. Me and my wife both had hospitality experience coming prior to real estate, bartending and serving, so that we were able to, learn how to effectively communicate, problem solve, multitask, you're running sections, things of that nature. And I have noticed that a lot of people with that background who get into real estate, as long as they're willing to put in the work, are able to accelerate into higher production quicker, I think, because they kind of have those social skills. And it sounds like that's something that kind of worked for you.
It just was an easy transition for me. I didn't worry about what I was saying. I just talked.
Yeah, there you go. So worry about connecting with people and just having that conversation piece. Back then, probably not too much texting really at all. Anything going on, no texting, no email. No, that's all there was.
There weren't even fax machines in 84.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, we had real estate books where the listings came out once a week. That's how we found listings. Contracts were NCR, 3 copies, press hard, sign here kind of things. 1 page. So, yeah, it was a whole different world.
Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that? Because obviously there's not too many of our guests who are kind of doing it before computers, internet, email, all that stuff. Talk about, what it looked like kind of doing real estate back in there in the 80s when you had the book, when you're meeting with clients, and then what you've seen since you've been doing it in this industry for quite some time, what you've seen the progression and how you feel that might have obviously helped your business for efficiency, but also maybe some of that personal touch possibly went away as we kind of progressed.
I think it's always a people business. At the end of the day, you've got to meet someone and work with them to buy a home. It's
Right.
still not completely automated. So I don't think that has changed. It's easier in some respects because of the internet and it's easy access to a lot of information. On the other hand, people disqualify an agent or properties before they even get to you because
Mhm.
they think they've got enough information.
Mhm.
Then they had to meet with you to get into a home, to see it, and have someone guide them through the process.
Almost like a gatekeeper mentality. They couldn't get into homes
They could
without.
not. I mean, unless there was an open house.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, and
So-
even find them because there's no, besides if they're going to driving around, look for signs or pick up flyers potentially. That was it.
There were ads in the newspaper.
Yeah.
I mean, and there were for sale by owners in the newspaper. It was all print driven. Yeah. So people would call you from an ad in the paper. Hey, I want to talk about this house. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's completely changed from now getting that inquiry and speed to lead and how efficient you have to be. Because I remember even purchasing back then, I think I bought my first one in 01, which I know we were using kind of that old gatekeeper mentality, the agent we were working with, showing us the homes and like even scheduling showings. It was like, and I don't know how you were doing business then, but it's almost like you had a client for the day. Like you were going out, you were seeing a list of properties rather than the one-offs here and there because you get that book weekly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they would load in your car and you would be gone for a day. And I laugh now because I've had agents, especially when the market shifted and slowed down a little bit now, say to me, well, I'm going to have to show them a couple houses over a few days. I'm like, so?
Yeah.
Try being out with a relocation client for 3 days that's here that has to buy a house.
Right.
And they are in your car. You're taking them to lunch. Their kids are screaming.
They don't know the area that well.
They don't know the area at all.
So you're driving them all
you're
over.
You're giving complete tours of Tampa, and you better know your geography, right?
Yeah, no MapQuest back then, right?
No, paper maps. We would have people come in and sit down, but they came to your office. I mean, there were so many advantages to that.
Yeah.
They came to your office, you sat down with a map, you guided them through it that way. Here's where we're going today, tomorrow, this kind of thing. These are the houses we're going to see. We had printouts. We did have printers and got in the car.
So then what I'm guessing is obviously client load, like obviously right now with technology, you can handle, I'm assuming, a lot more clients than you could back then. However, your, I don't want to say capture rate, but your retention rate of the people working with you once you met with them, because they weren't able to have access to all this information. It's like you were able to retain them. They were going to work with you where it's not as, all right, a potential buyer might go to a property on 10 different sites, click on the property and get contacted by 10 different agents.
There was still some of that. I mean, every person that you touched did not end up, being your client. They would go off. They would see an open house. They knew somebody. But the market was small. There were 3 major real estate companies. And so, we had the bulk of the business. But yeah, it was a lot more work, I think. It was, I mean, there were no lock boxes. You had to literally go to an office. If you had 6 showings in a day, you had to go and pick up a key, sign it out, and then return it.
I didn't know that. I never knew that.
Yeah.
Huh.
So,
Interesting. Learn something new every day. So talk to us. So I know you obviously went to school for social work, kind of got into that out of school while you're kind of contemplating going to law school. You've always not only been, I would say, when it comes to real estate, it wasn't just transactional for you. You ran larger scale operations. I know with at other companies, you were running a large REO division. With 54 Realty, you ran a Zillow offer division there with Annie for the 2 years it was here in Tampa, kind of overseeing that. And now you've kind of gone into more of a coaching role. So I know obviously like the hospitality, I would think would help you with the communication and the sales ability, but do you feel that kind of that social work background kind of gave you, I don't know, the pattern or the blueprint to kind of go more of that coaching role or more of that organizational management structure?
It could have, because I have a minor in psychology. So, I learned to read people at an early age and to really analyze a situation, which I think is a skill that you need to have in real estate to be successful.
100%.
You've got to know your client. You've got to know where they are. You've got to know the big picture of what you're trying to do with them. So, yeah, that helped me. That did. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So then, we always like to say kind of, figure out what are some of the attributes or skill set you picked up that kind of helped you get into real estate? And obviously, we know there's probably some things you have a vision of what it's going to be like, and there's some things that met your expectation, others that might not have. What's one thing that when you got into real estate, you would say the one thing you didn't expect?
I did not expect to come out of the gate strong, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I was lucky. I mean, I had my first listing was $600,000 in original Carolwood.
Wow.
It was a referral from a friend of mine, her mom, and I was lucky. I mean, I don't know why they listed with me, to tell you the truth. A very prominent Tampa family.
Mm-hmm.
And that launched my business. But then it came to a halt
Mm-hmm.
because what they weren't doing was giving me the tools to, when nothing was happening, to figure out how to make things happen.
Mm-hmm.
When I was doing well, I was the teacher's pet,
Mm-hmm.
and the broker loved me. I was a young kid.
Mm-hmm.
But when things kind of went, okay, nothing.
There's no support. No help.
Right. There was not the support there.
So talk to us a little bit about that too, because obviously nowadays there's a lot of competition with technology, cloud-based. It makes it kind of easier, I would think, to run a brokerage. When you were kind of getting into real estate in the Bay Area, how many brokerages were there? Like, what did that look like?
It was small. I was with a Better Homes and Gardens huge franchise,
Mm-hmm.
and in Carolwood there was Smith and Associates, there was Tampa, which was a big player, and they had multiple offices: Temple Terrace, South Tampa, Carolwood,
Mm-hmm.
and then there were a few other
Like mom and
smaller
pop?
ones. Yeah, and I would say by the 90s, it started to branch out more and more smaller offices opening. And, the Bohannons, the
Mm-hmm.
Bohannons started Carolwood Village Homes and Realty, and they were sucking a lot of top agents. So the competition started like that. Yeah.
Interesting, yeah, because all those big players. I know Remax kind of came on later on. Obviously, Keller Williams, things of that nature. Those large franchises that you kind of see all over the place
Mm-hmm.
now really weren't. I think Remax was the 80s, but Keller, I don't know exactly when they kind of came into fruition, but I know they don't start franchise until the area till later on. But you didn't see that till
No, I have a
later.
friend that just posted. She went to KW. God, there was a Prudential came into. There was Merrill Lynch, okay, but it was very high end executive type real estate company, and
Like a Sotheby's type of vibe.
yeah. It attracted some big agents, and just because of the profile of the company. And then who bought them? They became Prudential Florida.
I didn't know that.
Right.
Which is later turned into Berkshire Hathaway.
Before then, it was a conglomerate of three guys who then sold to Arvida. And yeah, it goes on and on.
And on.
Yeah, but then that was Prudential Tropical, and now, Dewey and Allen at Berkshire. So
what was the agent count like? Like when you were in these offices? Because obviously nowadays most of them are going to be, I would say, small to medium size. You're going to have some brokerages with a larger head count.
Mm-hmm.
But back then when you had few players, obviously transactions were going to be less. But were they bigger offices because there were less options, or were there just a lot less people in real estate back then?
I think there were always a lot of people that had a license.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like today. Nothing
Right.
like today. But I'm guessing it was a long time ago. 100 agents maybe, which is not, small.
Small. No, that's a decent
Tampa
size.
was probably one of the largest. Better Homes and Gardens was big, especially when they started opening multiple offices and went to Pinellas.
Hmm.
So there was a large agent grab there. And they did lots of relocation business when companies used to transfer people and buy their house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there was that faction.
Yeah, because you still see
business.
those like relocation companies still dealing with like the Caldwells, Berkshires, some of the brokerages still in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I know back then that was probably one of the main lead sources,
It was
other than a sphere of influence.
It was huge.
Yeah.
It was huge, and it brought in tons of business. Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
if you could get your way in there
Into
as
those-
an agent, yeah, you were
Doing pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, as far as now, transition a little bit into kind of what you're doing with your business. So now you're kind of in more of a coaching role, and you're training and coaching up agents into production. still working your sphere, still doing transactions, but not as heavy as you once were into it. I always ask the agents, like, what's the one thing you're working on to ensure that you have success in your business and that you're going to be able to maintain that? With you, I guess my question would be phrased in a way of, what are you coaching? What's the one main thing you're coaching on? Obviously, I know there's a lot that you're trying to instill in the agents' head to really help them get into production.
To be consistent with what they're doing. Don't be afraid to talk to people. Don't be afraid to make that leap, and be focused. And you have to be hyper focused. It's got to be, you've got to be dedicated, especially in the first couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not, you're going to hit that wall,
Mm-hmm.
or you're going to, just be in a place where you have no business or you have no income.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a rough place to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think here, I mean, we have all the tools. It's really terrific. I've never been at a company that provided this much support, especially with people that have so much experience in the business, teaching them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Absolutely.
hands-on. They can call me, they can call you and get an answer from seasoned professionals.
Which a lot of people, not downplay it, I think take for granted. I think a lot of people who don't know that a lot of brokerages still to this day don't operate like that. You're kind of on an island on your own.
You are. I mean, it looks good. It's glitzy. Might be a big corporate company, and they have a presence, and I appreciate that. But as a single agent, and you come into a company like that, and we've been in those places, you're an island.
It's almost coming full circle to when you first started, and you were talking about a little prior in this podcast where, when you were kind of the teacher's pet, broker's pet, I'd call it, you got the one listing, you're probably getting a lot of attention, but then your business slowed down a little bit. You're just kind of another fly on the wall, and when you're looking for help or guidance, it was all up to you.
I mean, literally, the broker wouldn't talk to me.
Yeah.
I was like, what did I know? I'm like, as a kid, like, what did I do wrong? I'm stuck here, and you are, I'm not making you money.
I guess you weren't bringing in $600,000 listings.
Yeah, right. It was disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
It was disappointing. So, and that actually led me into a back office position.
Is that when you started because you were running for a brokerage, an REO division, right? Which is real estate owned, bank REOs.
Prior to that, I was recruited to go to Watson Realty. They were in Tampa at that time, and they did, they had a huge third-party relocation division. And
yeah, that's right. You were running the reload.
That was that, yeah. So, and I never regret any steps I've taken in that position. I learned a lot. I mean, I saw a lot of different homes and neighborhoods I'd never seen. I counseled people on moving, and I got to understand the appraisal side. I had to meet with these top appraisers because they appraised every house, and we together had to determine value, and they taught me a lot. You can't take 3 comps and average them out and here's your price. Yeah. It was really good training and information.
Taught you how to make more of the adjustments than just kind of a weighted average, I would call it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where I got into doing back office. And once you get into something like that, people know what you do, so they're looking for you.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So, the main thing you would tell the agents kind of is obviously stay consistent. So you're coaching them. It's like, hey, stay consistent, do what you're doing. It's all, because I always say too, it's about the micro commitments. Usually people in success, it's not one big thing. It's that they're just disciplined in their activities to keep doing what they need to ensure success. So that's obviously, once they kind of come in, they start working, you're kind of coaching with you. If somebody who's like on the fence thinking about getting licensed, or maybe they have been licensed, but really haven't started working in real estate or taking it too serious, what would be the one thing that you would tell them to kind of get their psyche ready and to make sure that they set proper expectations for themselves?
I think that they need to understand this is a business. And when I ask them, well, what got you into real estate? What made you decide that you wanted to be a realtor? And they tell me, I like houses. It has nothing to do with the house. It's about people and honing your people skills, which is what we coach to them continually. You can get 50 leads, but if you don't have the ability to speak to them in a way where you're connecting with them, you're going to have 50 leads and no closings. So you've got to, be a sponge. take it in. I literally, when I got started, my broker we did dialing for dollars, which every Monday we came in with our list of for sale by owners, and there were a group of us, and we would call for sale by owners to get appointments. Right? Got to get in the door somehow. And she would sit at the end of my desk and coach me on what to say. Be on the phone. She'd say, say that. I did it. I didn't question it. I thought, these people know way more than I do. So I'm going to take it from the top. And if they're investing their time in me, I'm going to listen.
Absolutely.
And, but everyone doesn't do that.
Yeah. And I've heard one of the coaches that I've mentored under, he always said, emulate before you innovate. And I always say, if somebody gives you if you're not having success, or you're at where you want to be, and somebody kind of hands you the blueprint, don't question it. I see the biggest challenge that I see, especially with agents and you're coaching them or helping them, is they'll kind of get the blueprint. You'll tell them what to do. The first thing they do is start critiquing it, start changing it before they even start. Right. And it's like, hey, get that success, kind of what you're saying. Hey, they're coaching what to say. They had success. You're not questioning anything. Now, I'm sure as time progressed, you started to formulate the dialogue and a language pattern that worked for you. But until then, it's just like, hey, let me do what they're doing because it's working.
Correct. Right. So if someone tells me this is what you need to get in the door with a person, I did it.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not brain surgery, but it is understanding the business and understanding what you need to do to get in front of people. And I think today it might be a little more difficult because there's so many options. It's so easy to push that button. Well, that agent didn't tell me what I wanted to know. I'm going to push the next listing on Zillow and maybe somebody else will help me. Yeah.
And it's so fast moving too. It's so fast paced and constantly pivoting, moving what's working, what's not. And I think the barrier to entry, especially for somebody trying to be a single agent, do it on their own, is much more difficult now than years past. And I'm talking years past, even when I started to really get in the real estate market, like 2010, 2011. I think it's very difficult where you see like teams or brokerages like leads divisions become more valuable because there's just so much to it and it moves so quick. So
it does. And you got in a time where it was turbulent and there were people that came in and capitalized on that and made millions of dollars very fast with the short sales and that end of the business. That was tough. That was a tough time.
The advantage I think we had, the competitive advantage is, so we weren't in it during the good times, right? That 05, 06, 04, everybody's making money. I was doing mortgage at the time. We ended up going belly up in 08. But long story short is when we got into it, I think what we see as the opportunity is there was so much negativity in the business. Like, everybody hated real estate, including realtors. Yeah. So I just put my head down and worked. And I think that's what allowed us to build our foundation with my wife and kind of just be able to grow from there. Because most realtors stop working. That transition, that short sales, whole new way of doing business.
It was nuts. I managed a portfolio of short sales. And that owner of that business was a young guy. I mean, late 20s or mid 20s. And he came in and he was a CPA by trade and did his numbers. I mean, it's all numbers.
Yeah.
And he figured out a way to make those numbers in a bad market work for him. And he launched an incredible career of not only managing short sales, but buying properties and, A to B and B to C, and had a large network of investors then, and they were all working together. Made a ton of money.
Yeah, I know a lot of people back then. Yeah. I know there were changes to it, and I don't know all the ins and outs because I was just getting into it. But a lot of people doing the double transactions there where they had an in buyer already, but negotiating the short sale on the back end.
Oh, yeah. So I see those investors, small-time, one-off investors starting to pop up in our leads. And I think, you don't know what you're doing.
No.
They don't know what you're doing. We're not even close to that kind of market right now, and you're wasting your time.
Well, and now they eventually came. I would say I saw them more from when I'm looking back, really in like 2013, they really started to pop up on a macro scale. But now these, mom and pop investors or smaller investors are competing with hedge funds, which weren't in the market in that 2010, 2011. They started to surface there 2012, 2013.
Right, correct. And that totally changed the landscape of the business. They bought so many homes that a first-time buyer could get into, which sucked that market dry. And I think it's still affecting us today.
Well, they're still sitting on their inventory. They released it.
We worked with Progress Residential, and I think we marketed for them. We might have been on the other side. Yet we were on the acquisition side because we had to do, figure out what the ROI was. They wanted a 5-year projection. That's not easy to do, by the way.
Especially back then.
Yeah. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball,
Mm-mm.
but they had their formulas. We did them, and they were supposed to liquidate those, hold and sell in 5 years, and they haven't done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
mean,
that back then because that was their game plan. It just seems that they kind of hold on to that portfolio and they're still actively buying.
they are, and a huge amount of inventory,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that really hurt us.
Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, I know like a lot of people with the mindset of the market, being down, and I don't want to say necessarily it's down. It's not as hot as it was back in May or June of last year. But I was looking at inventory. It's obviously always supply and demand that it comes back to. And our inventory, a lot of people don't know in the Bay Area this month was down 13% from last year.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are
Mm-hmm.
unaware of that. So it's not like there's this, everybody's like, oh, here it comes again, or another wave of foreclosure short sales. I don't see that happening. In fact, past couple of weeks, we have a lot of agents losing out on multiple offers again.
Mm-hmm.
And reason being is nobody's releasing this inventory. One, people have low interest rates. They're able to qualify for their mortgages.
Right.
They're not having these subprime,
Right.
pay option arms, adjustable rate mortgages. And then these hedge funds and these bigger investors who continue to kind of have a strangle on the rental market. Rental rates are still high.
Right.
So why not? They're going to
Yeah,
keep acquiring more inventory.
Right. I mean, they
getting more
bought it
investment.
for 50 cents on the dollar
Yeah.
compared to today's market. If they ever release them,
Yeah.
they could retire.
Yeah. If we ever see that.
If we ever see that, you're right. You're right. So, it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be. I'm definitely curious to see kind of what these next couple of years look like in real estate. We kind of got that. We're having like more of I think a healthier, stabilized market pre-COVID. COVID came.
Mm-hmm.
We got that cash influx in the market. Kind of was gangbusters for about a year and a half. Last year, interest rates kind of coming up started to slow down a bit, but this month in January already is kind of giving me a little bit of those post-COVID feelings where I can see by spring, by summer, we might be back in those aggressive bidding wars, overpriced homes, see some aggressive appreciation. So I'm kind of curious on how this year plays out. I think that's definitely going to tell a lot.
I agree with you. And you can, when you've been in the business long enough, you can kind of feel
Yeah.
that momentum building.
Yeah.
And I can see it. I called a client the other day and I said, hey, I sold her a house last year. She hates it. Nothing I did.
Right.
But I sold her house and she made a ton of money. She bought something for cash, and she wants to be back in Carrollwood.
Mm-hmm.
And so we stay in touch. Called her the other day and said, oh, the interest rates. I said, interest rates have dropped.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'm going to tell you what I think. I think that if they get below 6, they could be 5.999. It's psychological.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, I think nationwide, a lot of markets might be a little bit more stagnant, but from what I was reading, like Florida and Texas still have so many people relocating that I think we're kind of in this bubble per se. And even if interest rates start to dip because of what's going on a national level, it's not slowing down our buying here. And once those rates do start to trickle down, my guess is that we'll see, I don't know when, but I think high 4s, low 5s is where I eventually see it kind of settling down at. I think we'll be back to maybe not quite as aggressive, but a pretty aggressive seller's market, similar to where we were there early 2000, 22, late 21.
Yeah.
So.
And there's so much money in this town now.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing to see how it's exploded. And
so much still coming.
Money, yeah, that we don't see.
No.
I mean, it's here. It's big.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, because even the luxury markets, usually that's kind of going to be one of the things you kind of look at. Like usually when you have a slower market, luxury slows up. But I'm still seeing bidding wars in the luxury market. Usually, our luxury market typically before this, 2020, I would say would be 12 months average home sale. It's going to be a little bit longer. Some obviously going quicker. And now it just seems like as soon as they come up, sometimes they're going. So there's a lot of money still coming in the area.
And when you bring businesses in, they're going to bring people at lower levels, and they've got to have a place to live. So, yeah, commercial is booming with apartments, but not everybody is an apartment dweller. So they're going to be spreading out looking for a house.
Well, and the price to rent these apartments these days.
It's nuts.
Even at a higher rate, sometimes that mortgage is going to be less than the apartments.
Yeah,
so
for sure. Yeah.
Depends on where you're looking. But yeah, well, it's been great having you, Debbie. For any potential buyer, seller out there looking for a real estate agent in the Bay Area, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Text me, call me.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And what number can they reach you on?
813-368-7468.
All right. And we'll go ahead and get that posted when we go ahead and throw this podcast up. We greatly appreciate you being a guest on this week's podcast.
It was fun.
And thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Real Estate Playbook.